I have a startup in Finland, and well, today I'll talk about what it's like to have a startup in Finland. So, if you're thinking about establishing your startup in Finland or Europe, well, you have some, I don't know, some guidelines or maybe some examples of how it actually goes. Not to spoil anything, we're actually moving our startup away from Finland. Currently, I'm in my apartment in Espoo. It's like 10 minutes away from Helsinki. So, there's the view. Wow. We established our startup in July in 2023, and we've been doing so far okay. And now we're kind of moving our company actually to United States, to Delaware. We're establishing a Delaware C Corp. So first of all, in Finland, they don't really care about innovation. Like, it's quite obvious why all the innovation happens in the United States, because it's easier to find investors there and it's easier to convince them and to sell them vision. Investors in Europe and especially in Finland, they're way more conservative. But to really convince them to invest, you already have to have paying customers. And when you're on the meetings with investors like that, they only care about numbers, which is very different from investors from United States. At least they ask your vision or what's the problem you're solving, and like they get at least interested in that kind of stuff. And the one core difference I also noticed between investors in Europe and United States is that the valuation of startups is way different. So if your startup is like valued at 2 million in Europe, it will be 5x in the United States. And the thing about Finnish investors, they will take half of your company and give you 50,000 euros if you're lucky enough to convince them to invest. A good thing about having startup in Finland and Europe is that there are a lot of grants that they can give to you. I haven't got any though, but if you have your startup in Europe and Finland, you can apply for some grants, especially if you're in some clean tech or sustainability. It's very well developed. To have hardware startups in Finland, it's a little bit harder because of the parts. If you have some kind of a PCB or electronic boards, and they still get delivered from China or Alibaba, but they have like here like a 20x margin. So if you buy here some kind of electronic component for 20 euros, the chances are you could buy it from Alibaba for 50 cents. But you have to wait for delivery a few months. What I really like about Finland is that they're very rich ecosystem of startups. They have a bunch of conferences all the time, especially if you're somewhere in Helsinki. Every November, they have a huge Slush conference, which is very popular around the world. It's like the world leading startup conference. So that's very cool. The startup ecosystem is kind of small. Everyone knows everyone, and it's very well connected. So it's actually a big plus of having a startup here. Now, what I really don't like about having a startup in Finland is that you have to pay huge taxes on salary. The taxes here are like 40 or close to 50%. So if you are employing someone and you're paying them like 140,000, they will get like 70 or 80,000 in the end, because you have to pay them pensions, you have to pay insurance, you have to pay other taxes on all of that, and it's insane. That's why when we were calculating the amount of funding we need to raise, we're like, okay, you know what? That's not gonna work. We have to raise like at least twice as more if we have only 5 developers. So that's why we're kind of like moving our company to specifically to United States, because the tax climate is well easier and just better. Also, what's very interesting about working culture in Finland is that there's a strong work-life balance in Finland. I don't like that personally. I like working all the time. And especially if you're building a startup, if you're building a company and you want to make something great out of it, you have to work pretty much 24/7. I mean, look at all the companies that Elon Musk created. All his employees always complain that the employees at Tesla or SpaceX have to sleep in the office and work all the time. That's the kind of startup culture I want. In Finland, people go to work at 9 and they have an hour of coffee, they go for lunch, they enjoy themselves, and then they do some work and leave at 4 to go to sauna and drink some beer. So there is a very strong work-life balance, and I personally think for a startup it's not good. So that's why I really don't like that. I like personally working 24/7, and I expect, at least in the earlier days in a startup, okay, I'll be honest, I expected all the time when working very hard on a startup to make it grow into $1 billion unicorn. So that's why I personally think it's kind of a con rather than a pro.